Hi, everyone. Thank you for sticking around and hanging out with us a little bit longer. We have this conversation and one more panel left. So help me welcome the Lyme trials, which you guys kept saying working title. So I'm going to say working title, Lyme trials. Documentarians Lindsay Keys, Daria Lombroso, Winslow Crane Murdoch, and Chris Hedges. I agree. So we're here doing this conversation. We're not taking questions in this. It's going to be very brief. But we want to set the stage for the panel that's to come. What we're going to be talking about for the next hour is the global impact of Lyme disease. And as documentarians and people who've lived through Lyme disease personally and have also been documenting the narrative across the globe, the people on the stage have the most unique perspective in Lyme disease from anyone in this room, because truly they've, in a very unbiased manner, have been going and collecting this information and collecting these stories and putting it together, trying to understand the narrative. So thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how would you like to start this conversation? You know, we talked last year, and you showed your beautiful the start of a trailer, where the work that you've been doing was largely focused in the U.S. And then as I've followed you this year and I've heard about your story, you've started traveling the globe. Can you talk to me about what took you on that journey?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start by saying that, so Winslow and I met at our doctor's office, both with Lyme, and I put Lyme in quotes because there's more than just Lyme at play, but at our doctor's offices, we started there to meet people from around the world in upstate New York, people from Italy, Australia, Ireland, so on and so forth. So immediately we realized that there was something much bigger happening than just the Northeast. And as we started to film, more and more people started to mention Europe, and then Africa and Australia, and unfortunately not much about South America or Central America right now, or Asia, but we were tipped off early on to a pandemic that we thought was just in our backyard. So that took us first to France. I say first as in that was the first country that we traveled to outside of the U.S.
Right.
So
that's the Eiffel
that's
Tower.
France.
So was there a person, was there a contact in particular that brought you there?
In France, we spoke with Dr. Christian Perron, who's a Lyme doctor in France, and he just echoed a lot of what we'd heard in the United States. And I think what was interesting from our perspective was seeing how the narrative around Lyme in the United States has been exported abroad. And so what that means for patients and what that means for physicians who are trying to help those patients, and sort of the downstream effects of the controversy in Lyme has spread outside of just the United States.
Yeah.
And so we spoke with him about that, among other things.
Yeah, and not just the narrative, but the actual guidelines, right? Like the guidelines that are being set here in the U.S. by the IDSA or what are being used globally for the treatment of Lyme, right? And so that has fed into this narrative that ultimately impacts the way that people around the world are being diagnosed and treated.
I mean, in making films, you want to tell a story, and the story's about people. And, you know, for my filmmaking career, a lot of the stories we've been telling are about people who are very passionate and taking risks to pursue goals. And I think, you know, one of the trips to Europe was with Dr. Horowitz, who was also doing work in Europe. And, you know, you follow the story through them, and, you know, the story just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Chris, I'm very interested on your perspective in joining this team of filmmakers and yourself with a very prestigious career. What have you been most surprised to learn about Lyme disease on this global journey?
Oh my goodness. I mean, almost everything. Although I did know a lot about it because I also live in the Hamptons, and you know, it's one of the centers of Lyme, and so I have a lot of family members that have been affected, and other family members lived in Martha's Vineyard. So, you know, I could see the spread through my own experience, and then coming in on contact and getting to know Lindsay and Winslow and Daria and seeing the, you know, the people that they've filmed, just the magnitude of the story and the complexity of the disease, and that it's not an easily identifiable disease, and it has to be looked at in a very broad way. And you know, the holdbacks and the stopback to the disease, being the NIH and CDC in many ways, you know, are things, and Congress, that need to be dealt with. And, you know, that was an eye-opener for me.
Lindsay, what are we looking at here?
So
What's happening?
So this is in Amsterdam. Dr. Horowitz is on the stage that they're looking at. It's kind of tripping me out because I'm looking at them and then all of you here. But yeah, it was really shocking. Maybe it wasn't shocking. It was saddening to see the people that we kept hearing about. We kept hearing about all these patients all over the world, and then we go to these places and we meet them, and they're just as desperate, if not more desperate, than the patients we meet here, because in some of these countries, there's no doctor, not one, treating or able to treat, unfortunately. So most of the people, if not all, in this audience, they either themselves have Lyme or someone close to them has Lyme. And it was strange for us. I think Winslow and I understood what it's like to be Dr. Horowitz for a moment, because after the event, we walked out and people saw that we had cameras and they were just swarming us. Everybody wanted to tell their story. Everyone wanted to be heard. And we kept looking at each other with like panic in our eyes, like, how are we going to get out of this situation? Because they just kept coming and they didn't want to let go. And I understand. It's just so maddening and isolating for people to have their lives turned inside out by a disease that isn't believed, isn't funded. So we understand their pain. And I think that everyone just wanted to know that there was hope. And so they were clinging to us, you know, what's happening in the US? Is someone going to save us? And we're like, well, we're doing what we can. So, but yeah, it's uncanny how similar the stories start to sound. Yeah.
For those who are still online with us, I saw a note. I've been checking in on Facebook Live every now and then, and there's a friend and colleague of yours, Fred. He was tuning in, and he said to say hi to Jesse, and so I mean, even now, like we have a global community with us at all times who are in this fight.
Yeah, Fred is an amazing advocate, and I think it was really inspiring for us to meet him because everyone has their own style and their own approach to raising awareness, and people could take some notes from what Fred's doing, I think, and you obviously here too. The presentation is so important when you're trying to engage people who might think that the topic is fringe.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that's true.
Yeah,
it's true. So Julia was part of your story last year. We saw footage of her, and we heard a lot about her story. And I see her here. Can you tell me what's going on?
Yeah. In February, we went with Julia and her father Enrico to India, and we were there for about a month with them. And when we were there, you know, again, we met people at this clinic that they were at from around the world. And we wanted to follow them there because I think it shows that people will go as far as they have to go to try to get better. And for a disease that frankly has a narrative surrounding it in mainstream medicine that that it's not that serious, that people could be making it up, right? The lengths that people to go to get better shows just how hard this disease is. And so we wanted to be there with them. We wanted to show that journey. It was a long way from home. And it was a really intense experience.
We all got sick.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Having Lyme in India wasn't easy. But yeah, I mean, just Julia's story and her family, and everyone in our film, something that we've really tried to show, and I think that's what everyone here is doing as well. We've tried to show people that are stepping up in the right ways, and are saying that, like, we're not going to look away from this. And even though it's hard and it's controversial, and that there's this debate and there's so much suffering, that people are rising to the occasion. And so all of the people that we've featured in our film are people who have done that, and Julia and the whole family really exemplify that in a big way.
So Chris, you know, your career, you've spanned so many topics in the work that you've done, and so I feel like you probably have a really good understanding of how storytelling, documentary work like this can influence advocacy and policy, and ultimately change the process that we live in this world. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about this work, the importance of this work for the people like us?
Well, I mean, one of the great things is it's kind of like, you know, a golden age of documentaries now. I mean, there are a lot of documentaries on television and the many channels and streaming they have. So they're getting out to the world and changing lives. But in the end, you know, it's people who change things. So, you know, hopefully it can be an inspirational tool for people to kind of understand the issue and to motivate them to come together to create change.
Something that was brought up earlier, which resonated with all of us, we've been talking about it with a lot of people here actually, is the Lyme disease community's challenges to unify. And so I hope that with our film we can do that, because we're in the middle of it all. And it does seem like this has been unfolding for 44 years. And I think some people are just wondering, how do I get involved? How do I channel my confusion, my anger, my questions, all of the all the emotions that come with entering this experience? And so for us, something that we're really looking forward to is helping guide people and and unite not just people, but the efforts and the energy and the emotion, and for as long as possible. Even if it's just a day. We're seeing rallies and protests that, for climate change, for example, that are making big waves. And why shouldn't we be able to have that for Lyme disease?
Yeah, I think just to add to that too, there's a persistent narrative around Lyme that exists within the mainstream. And it's really hard to counter that if there isn't another competing narrative, right? And so we're really hoping that with this film we're able to present an experience and present stories that are not only true to those living these experiences, but are really validated by science and research, and are able to flip the narrative on its head and create a new possibility for people suffering from Lyme, for people working hard on the research to innovate in this space, to help bring in the funding that's needed to move this forward. We're really, really trying to view this as a social impact film first and foremost.
I've been reflecting a lot on the last 4 years and what things looked like to me when we first entered this space and where we are today. And I hope it's not naive of me to say that I'm hopeful, that I see there is a momentum building, and I think that today's event demonstrates that. We reached capacity for our registration. We couldn't have fit any more people in the room, and that's incredible to me. And to have advocates and policymakers up on the stage talking about real changes that are happening. And I know that for some the change isn't happening fast enough, and there's still more work to be done, but I feel hopeful, and I don't know if you guys share that sentiment with me.
It depends on the day. And then who we talk to.
Yeah.
And that's relevant, actually. I think it's important to be around
I think
people.
there's more people than ever who are doing good work around Lyme. And the caliber of the research, the caliber of the science, the institutions that are getting involved, the money that's pouring into it, there obviously needs more on all fronts, right? But as I said before, like, people are stepping up, and the right people are starting to step up, and that's starting to change the narrative. And that's really our goal with the film. I mean, I think that's what a film can do so quickly, is begin to change the narrative, especially outside of the Lyme community. And that's really what needs to happen. Often these conversations are happening in this vacuum. So people who have Lyme, they know how hard Lyme is, right? But people who don't have no idea. And I know every Lyme patient is so sick of having to explain what they're going through. And so what we hope is that we can have a film where people can say, what I'm going through, it was captured really well. Go watch this, and maybe you'll understand a little bit better. And hopefully that can start to break through some of this.
Well, thank you guys for all of the work that you're doing. Thank you for being here today. Everyone give.
Yeah.